Morning, everyone. Welcome to day
I don't know.
9, 10, something like that.
The weather's just been
Bible
brutal.
study.
My mind is mush. And my eyes are shot, apparently.
Joining us today, we have Lucy.
I can't see her. Is this top of her nose? Hope everybody's doing well in the weather.
Yes. So, we're getting a little late start on our Bible study this morning. We've been in the barn, doing waters, all that good stuff. So, today we are again continuing with our chronological Bible study. We're in Exodus, I think 19, 20, and 21 is what it should be.
Un momento.
Coffee. It's so good. Feels so good when it touches the lips.
What was that guy's name? Wasn't Cowboy Bill, was it?
What?
Cowboy Bill on Hannibal. It rubs the lotion on its skin.
Oh,
That's what you
not,
sounded like.
That's not even what I was.
That's where you were, though,
Mm-mm.
in my head.
You got this up?
We're going to tell a few jokes, dance a little bit.
What are you doing?
I had to do this real quick.
Babe, this don't even pertain to the Bible study.
Yeah, I know.
You're Facebooking over here.
I am not. I'm working. Here. Do you think? Okay.
Should we schedule a Bible study around you?
Yes. Actually. You didn't know? Wait a minute. Let me sit down.
Oh, gosh.
Work comes first.
No, it
Yeah.
doesn't, babe. God, family, work. In that order.
Sorry. Okay, here we go. Sorry. My bad.
All right.
You know, I was thinking about our Bible study yesterday, like later in the day. It kind of, I don't know, maybe resonated a little bit, just settling down the challenge of faith. You know, like walking in faith even though you feel like there is no answer. Like they felt like they were going to die of thirst. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And to have faith at the same time, to like let your faith overpower your fear, I guess. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm.
Are you making fun of me?
No, not at all.
You're like,
Okay, 19, 20, 21 is where we're at today. Let's get started.
Exodus 19. On the first day of the third month after the Israelites left Egypt, on that very day, they came to the desert of Sinai. After they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites." So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the words the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has said." So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, "I am going to come to you in a dense cloud, so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you." Then Moses told the Lord what the people had said. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready by the third day, because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. Put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, 'Be careful that you do not approach the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain is to be put to death. They are to be stoned or shot with arrows. Not a hand is to be laid on them. No person or animal shall be permitted to live. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast may they approach the mountain.'" After Moses had gone down the mountain to the people, he consecrated them, and they washed their clothes. Then he said to the people, "Prepare yourselves for the third day. Abstain from sexual relations." On the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning, with a thick cloud over the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke, because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. As the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. The Lord descended to the top of Mount Sinai and called Moses to the top of the mountain. So Moses went up, and the Lord said to him, "Go down and warn the people so they do not force their way through to see the Lord, and many of them perish. Even the priests who approach the Lord must consecrate themselves, or the Lord will break out against them." Moses said to the Lord, "The people cannot come up Mount Sinai because you yourself warned us. Put limits around the mountain and set it apart as holy." The Lord replied, "Go down and bring Aaron up with you, but the priests and the people must not force their way through to come up to the Lord, or he will break out against them." So Moses went down to the people and told them. Exodus 20. And God spoke all these words. "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. When the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, "Speak to us yourself, and we will listen, but do not have God speak to us, or we will die." Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. God has come to test you, so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning." The people remained at a distance, while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites this: you have seen for yourselves that I have spoken to you from heaven. Do not make any gods to be alongside me. Do not make for yourselves gods of silver or gods of gold. Make an altar of earth for me, and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your sheep and goats and your cattle. Wherever I cause my name to be honored, I will come to you and bless you. If you make an altar of stones for me, do not build it with dressed stones, for you will defile it if you use a tool on it. And do not go up to my altar on steps, or your private parts may be exposed." Exodus 21. These are the laws you are to set before them. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years. But in the 7th year he shall go free, without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife when he comes, she is to go with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. But if the servant declares, "I love my master and my wife and children, and do not want to go free," then his master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door or the doorpost, and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be his servant for life. If a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as male servants do. If she does not please the master who has selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners, because he has broken faith with her. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, and marital rights. If he does not provide her with these 3 things, she is to go free without any payment of money. Anyone who strikes a person with a fatal blow is to be put to death. However, if it is not done intentionally, but God lets it happen, they are to flee to a place I will designate. But if anyone schemes and kills someone deliberately, that person is to be taken from my altar and put to death. Anyone who attacks their father or mother is to be put to death. Anyone who kidnaps someone is to be put to death, whether the victim has been sold or is still in the kidnapper's possession. Anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. If people quarrel and one person hits another with a stone or with their fist, and the victim does not die but is confined to bed, the one who struck the blow will not be held liable if the other can get up and walk around outside with a staff. However, the guilty party must pay the injured person for any loss of time and see that the victim is completely healed. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. But they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or 2, since the slave is their property. If people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman, and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. An owner who hits a male or female slave in the eye and destroys it must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye. And an owner who knocks out the tooth of a male or female slave must let the slave go free to compensate for the tooth. If a bull gores a man or woman to death, the bull is to be stoned to death, and its meat must not be eaten. But the owner of the bull will not be held responsible. If, however, the bull has had the habit of goring, and the owner has been warned but has not kept it penned up, and it kills a man or woman, the bull is to be stoned, and its owner also is to be put to death. However, if payment is demanded, the owner may redeem his life by the payment of whatever is demanded. This law also applies if the bull gores a son or daughter. If the bull gores a male or female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave, and the bull is to be stoned to death. If anyone uncovers a pit or digs one and fails to cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the one who opened the pit must pay the owner for the loss and take the dead animal in exchange. If anyone's bull injures someone else's bull and it dies, the two parties are to sell the live one and divide both the money and the dead animal equally. However, if it was known that the bull had the habit of goring, yet the owner did not keep it penned up, the owner must pay animal for animal and take the dead animal in exchange.
Dang.
I don't think that's literal.
How do you not think it's literal? It's right there.
What I mean is,
Like it clearly says.
I know.
Clearly says.
no, I get that part. But you know how a lot of times when, like, it's talking about, it's discussing something, and the reference is different. You know, like how we would use it. When I hear this, when we're reading about a bull goring a man, and then if the owner knew that it would gore, I mean, it applies to so much more than just a bull. That's what I mean. I don't think it's literal, meaning I think it means more than just a bull. It's something that is dangerous. This happens if the owner knew that it was dangerous. Then it happens to the owner. You know, do you understand what I'm saying? It's a lot more than just a bull we're talking about here. I think it's very broad in how it can be applied to life.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying.
You just said that to be nice. I can tell you.
No, but I think there's two different ways of there's two different ways that people look at the Bible. They read it and try to interpret what it says. One person. The other person reads it word for word. That's what it is. To me, when I read it, whatever's in the text word is what I go with. It's not. I don't think it's up to me to decipher.
It's not interpretation. That's not what I mean. Okay, you say, but you don't read it and literally take it, because the way they wrote things, the way it's written, is not some of the words, some of the terms, some of the.
And I understand.
They're not literal. Like, place your hand under my thigh, and whenever who is that? Was it Jacob?
Abraham.
Yes. Place your hand under my. That wasn't, like, that was said, but it wasn't literal. It was known to. It could be interpreted as something else, because that wasn't literally what happened.
But how do we know that's not literally what happened?
That's just what we've heard from our Bible recap. That scholars have said this is not a literally placing your hand under the thigh. It was meant blah. So that's what I mean. I'm not interpreting the Bible. When you listen to it, when you listen to the words, some of it is exactly, and then some of it is left as kind of a gray area, kind of like where you don't know if it's a year, 10 years, 1,000 years. You understand what I'm saying? So if it doesn't say it, like your question, where are the dinosaurs? You see what I'm getting at? So I just feel like when they're talking about, in 28, when they're talking about a bull, I think that...
In 28?
Here, Exodus...
verse 28.
Yeah. I don't think that it's just a bull he's talking about. I mean, I think he's talking about a bull, but I think it applies to many things.
You know, my take on this
It's society.
is it's crazy how far over time what parts of the Bible, because I've read the Ten Commandments as they show on pictures and stuff. I've never read the Ten Commandments in the Bible ever, and I don't even know if I've ever had them read to me. But I personally never read them. I've seen them like on Bible school or whatever. It's got like the
plaques,
picture,
yeah.
On the plaques, and where Moses held the plaque up and the lightning came down and laser engraved it.
Yeah.
Like a bajillion watt laser engraver. I've seen all that because that's kind of what appeals to you. I guess kind of catches your attention as a young kid or whatever. But
I just feel like the Ten Commandments, I mean, you know what they are. They're how society should behave.
Right, they're how
So
society.
that's-
But
so
when it
whenever he's
starts
talking about-
talking about like personal injury, like all this stuff. I don't think we got into protection of property, but I mean, like that's like it. I don't know. I guess it kind of makes me see how far society has evolved from what the original plan of God is.
Yeah, it's like
And even the Christian faith.
it's like they took it's watered down or maybe
It's so
expanded
watered.
to work better for the current society. Like they keep
Yeah.
keywords. But when you read this is how I was raised.
Just since you and I have been doing this, I've seen probably 3 or 4 different religions so far in here. Stuff that we've read, I've seen where Muslim comes out at. I see where the Seventh-day Adventists come out at. I see where
It's everyone's interpretation.
Christianity
except for the Muslims. The Muslims
comes out. I've seen where, and you can see if you actually read it. I guess what I'm trying to say, as you read it, moving through it, you can see the different bits of what religions have picked up.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And it's been so watered down. I think if we were to actually live by the Bible, I think we'd be in a world of hurt. I don't think people could stand to live by the Bible. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
But that's taken out of context too.
But how is that taken out of context though?
No. What I'm saying is, this goes back to, I said, if a bull gores a man or
Right.
woman, and this goes on, and I said, I think this applies to more than, this is behavior, not necessarily a bull. And you said, well, that's interpretation. I'm being literal. You want to be literal with what it says. Well, up here it says if people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands in court and the court allows. But if there's serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. Well, that only applies if you're in a fight and you hit a pregnant woman.
Well, no, look at it. I mean, if you see, it goes into protection of property. It goes into social responsibility.
No. Hold on. You said everything would be a eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Well, according to this, if you take it literally, it's just if a pregnant woman's injured. That goes back to what I was saying. I feel like, although it is being said at this point, a pregnant woman, right, or a bull, I think it applies to other things, is what I'm saying. Like you pulled out eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. You hear people say that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You never hear anybody say anything about a pregnant woman being hurt. That's because they pulled out what worked for them.
Well, that's just an easy phrase. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
I bet most people don't even know that it's.
Well, I didn't. But you know what? Okay, so this maybe this is. I think I believe this.
You think?
I think that.
You think? Or are you sure?
I think this is what I believe.
Okay.
I think when the Bible was written, I think it was literal, because they were setting up rules for what a society should live by. Now, I'm sure over the years the Bible's been interpreted, 100,000 different times, so it may look like something different to us now, but I think when this came out, when the original thing was written, I think it was probably literal, because at that point they didn't have no, I guess maybe understanding of watering something down. Does that make sense? Like, this is, they're
I'm
saying
sure
this
some of
is
the
what,
societies used it
this
for
is
they
what
wanted.
God said, this is what Moses came down and told us, this
I agree.
is 100% it. There's no veering from it.
I agree, but all of this is society's rules.
Mhm.
That's what this is. And I was raised, and I believe you were too, that people would call old school, where it's so much like this. Like it's black and white, no gray, and eye for an eye. I mean, simple, but there was so much. I can't tell you how many times my mom said, "You shall not lie." She would be like, she would adapt the 10 Commandments to work against me as a kid. Do you know what? God says you shouldn't lie. She would just roll with it.
Mm-hmm.
But things are so different than this today.
Yeah.
So different.
Yeah, it's just crazy seeing the words here versus what we live by, and I guess how we pick and chose, and we've grabbed what we wanted to.
I think that's society. I was thinking.
For our belief.
I can remember my mom said to me one time, "You shall not talk back to your mother."
She added that 10 commandments.
She
the
added
11th
everything
commandment.
to work to keep. She was trying to keep me in line. But yeah, I agree. I believe a lot of it's watered down to be appropriate for the time, I guess. Are you gonna read your?
Oh yeah.
Okay, Bible readers, it's.
I have an interesting chart here. Go ahead.
Okay, I do want to highlight the 10 Commandments in my Bible a little bit.
I have a chart here that's pretty neat. It gives a practical application of the commandments. You want me to read it while you're looking for yours?
No, I mean I know where I'm at, but I didn't know if I had something.
Does that mean you don't want me to read? That's okay. You can just tell me to hush.
No, if you want to read, you read.
No,
I don't think anybody's ever heard you read on here.
I was just gonna.
Can
read
you
it.
even read?
Not really.
Good.
I was just gonna read this.
Good.
I like the sound of your voice. It's much better than mine.
I like the sound of my voice too.
Look at over there. See on mine? Look, I got pages of this crap. You don't want to read mine. Okay, so I have a chart that's in my Bible, and it says it's the 10 Commandments, and what this is, and this Bible is really great because there's a lot of.
Time
Oh,
for
look,
our
it started,
weekly
babe.
check-in. How are you doing? What have you learned so
So there's a lot of good information in here.
Oh.
You need to be alone.
Sometimes I'm amusing myself. I may not be amusing to other people, but sometimes I amuse myself.
All right, so the 10 Commandments. So 1, you shall have no other gods before me. The practical application is show respect to God and refuse to prioritize anyone or anything else above him. 2, you shall not make for yourself an image. Live your life in wholehearted devotion to God. 3, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God in vain.
So that brings up a good question.
Hold on. Practical definition. Guard your speech to speak respectfully of God. Never use his name or for your own agenda. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so and I've heard it 2 different ways. Like I've heard people, you say goddamn, is that using the Lord's name in vain? Because I think something I read somewhere, the name God was, it's not saying like the Lord's name, like Yahweh. Like the name God is a term for Yahweh. It's not the actual name of God.
I don't know. Maybe that's something we should look into.
So,
Because, it says, speak of God, never use the name of your name for your own agenda. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God.
his name's Yahweh.
The Lord your God in vain. So, maybe so. I guess I never really thought of it that way. I don't know. Okay, let me finish.
I mean, I'm not trying to make it okay, but I mean, hell, I slip up and say it a lot. I mean, I'm not making any bones about it. I'm not perfect, but
He's not perfect.
I mean, it is what it is. I wouldn't be doing this if I were perfect. I wouldn't
Well,
be trying to learn the Bible.
If you were perfect, you'd be walking on water.
I walked on water out there on a pond, didn't I?
Okay, number 4. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Practical application is allow time for meditation with proper rest and relaxation.
Okay, so
5.
wait. Hold on. So it goes. Okay, so what day is the Sabbath on? Is it Saturday or is it Sunday? Why do we go to church on Sunday, but the Bible said it's supposed to be Saturday?
You need to ask John. Maybe we're not there yet. Okay.
That's a good question.
5. Honor your father and your mother. Treat parents with respect. And I'm going to tell you, I've cussed my mother.
I've cussed both my parents too. I mean,
I'm not doing that now.
Not in an older state, but
Yeah, as
younger,
a child.
when I was full of piss and vinegar.
Yesterday.
Well, I didn't cuss my parents yesterday.
No, but you were full of piss and vinegar yesterday. Okay. 6. You shall not murder. Oh, that's a good one. Practical.
No. Okay, so this raises another question.
Hold on. The 6th commandment says you shall not murder. It's Exodus 20:13. Recognize God's control over life and death is the practical definition of that. Which really is not what I would have thought it would have said. I would have thought, okay, so the practical definition is recognize God's control over life and death. I would have, well, I guess you could read that too. But I would have thought it would have been like, it's a sin to take another life. You know what I mean? In vain. A lot of that, there was one that said, what was it? Maliciousness or, anyway. Okay, what were you going to say?
Okay, so what do you, so the armies of them, what the military of them, the people when they fight against somebody else,
For survival?
Are they considering that murder? Because a lot of people consider what the military does now as murder.
No, I think that I don't think murder can be applied in battle or in war because you're defending yourself, right? So I don't think that it can be applied, but that's just my peon opinion. Or
a lot of people do. A lot of people feel that way.
I don't.
Oh, well, I don't either, but I'm just saying a lot of people do feel that way.
7. You shall not commit adultery. Excellent advice. Honor the vow of faithfulness to your spouse and God. 8. You shall not steal. Practical application would be guard against taking what is not yours. 9. You shall not give false witness against your neighbor. The practical application would be respond to others in integrity and respect, which is a huge, huge value to have and to teach your children. You know? Respond to others in integrity and respect, because that's how you get respect back. You shall not covet. Be satisfied with your own possessions and resources. Excellent too.
That's hard. I think a lot of people's. I mean, if you consider that a sin, I think probably everybody. That's a sin, and I bet that's probably one of the most common. I bet that is the most common sin.
And I can understand. So if you think about it, to be satisfied with your own possessions and resources, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive to do better. In my opinion, that just means you shouldn't judge your worth against somebody else's possessions. You know what I mean? Like if you covet what they have, then you think you have to have what they have in order to be as valuable as they are, or as important, or as established, or whatever words you want to use. But
because I have horse trailer envy.
Not anymore.
Well, no, we got a nice one now, but you always look at, like, you know, like when they come up on my Facebook, like I'm always looking at them like brand new ones. I'm like, holy cow, boy, that'd be freaking nice to have.
I don't. The only thing I think I envy would be a nice barn. But I'm not even hung up on that because ours works and does a lot of miracles. Anyway, but I think there's a lot to be said there in the 10th commandment.
Our barn has saved a lot of lives.
I know, that's why I love our barn. I wish, I had a bigger barn and a nicer barn, but I'm not complaining. I'm not jealous of, into a way that makes me want to cut off a limb in order to pay for it. But I think that you shall not covet really means, I think it's an inner peace kind of thing that allows you to, because if you're always working to get what somebody else has, how can you work on yourself or even know yourself if you're so, in your own family, if you're so worried about keeping up with everybody else? There's a peacefulness there that comes with being satisfied with who you are and your own goals. You don't have, if you want to do better, you do better, but you don't do it because somebody else has it. Just my opinion. Okay, you can read now.
I've and this maybe kind of seem far-fetched, but I've always kind of, like where they talk about, or maybe like you've heard, hang around people that are more than you, because it strives for you to do better and better. That if you hang around people that, and it sounds bad, but if you hang around people that are less than you,
well, when you say more or less, do you mean
never
has
have an
more
aspiration to become a better person, whether it's education, business, whatever the case may be.
I don't think that's applied appropriately. I think that I have heard, you establish your friends or you surround yourself with people who are
maybe have the same goals.
Admirable. No. Maybe, but not with possessions, with who they are. Like,
no, not necessarily. I'm not saying with possessions.
yeah, you hang out with people who are good people. Like, you surround yourself with people who are big-hearted, hardworking, respectable, people that you would trust and you strive to be like. People that when you hang around with people that whenever you feel down or you feel you're struggling, when you look at those people fill in that gap. You know what I mean? They give you that peace you need sometimes to keep going, and they're there for you. I don't think it has any, when you say more or less, I don't think it has to do with possessions or anything else, or money whatsoever. I think I find myself surrounding myself with I just look for good and a heart, and I can see how if you hang out with people who are like-minded, but maybe are stronger-willed, you know what I mean,
Or
or
smarter.
That's the kind of stuff you strive to be like. So yeah, I agree with that. You put those kind of people in your life because you want to get better at being good or intelligent or useful. You know, I can see that, but I could care less about monetary stuff. You know, like we have a group of friends that are absolutely amazing.
Oh yeah.
I mean, hearted, just hearts of gold and work ethic, and it's super intelligent, and they definitely fill in all the gaps that I have. You know what I mean? Like anything that I'm weak in, our friends, you know, really fill it up. So I feel very blessed that we have a wonderful group of friends that I would trust.
I think we've got a pretty big network of friends.
Well, I don't know if it's a big network of friends, but the ones we've got are awesome. But I think that, yeah, so off the subject, yeah, I think that you surround yourself with people that you want to be like.
I know there's probably, off the top of my head, there's probably 20 people, easy, that we could call that dropped everything they were doing and be here.
You know, those same 20 people, we do the same for.
Oh, absolutely.
But we do that for strangers.
Oh yeah, that's true too. I think yesterday was a pretty good example of that.
Yeah. Okay. Are you ready? You want to read?
Okay. Let's see. What 19 2 through 6. Israel's new sense of identity and ability was to be founded upon their relationship with God. The Israelites had suffered under Egyptian bondage. Their sense of identity had been defined by that terrible experience. God had graciously delivered them and had brought them to himself. Now the Lord called the people of Israel to be a kingdom of priests and his holy nation. They were no longer a nation of slaves. As we progress spiritually, we also need to see ourselves as people loved and blessed by God, not as slaves to sin, passions, and unwholesome desires. 19, 12 through 23. Here we see that God set limits or boundaries beyond which the people of Israel, or even their livestock, were not to step. There was mortal danger for those who overstepped God's boundaries. The unauthorized approach into God's holy presence meant certain death. We, too, must learn to respect the limits placed upon us by God's word. We only invite painful consequences when we ignore them. 21 through 11. What do we do, 19 through 21? Okay. I always have a hard time keeping track of that.
Me too.
The first four of the Ten Commandments provided the Israelites with a few foundational principles to govern their relationship with God. They were not to worship any other gods, make idols of any kind, misuse God's name, or violate God's Sabbath day of rest. Each of these principles represents boundaries that God had set to define his relationship with his people. Jesus later summed up this virtual relationship as the greatest commandment: love thy Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Loving God includes living out of constant, I don't know why I had a problem saying that word, living out of constant faith and commitment, like hit like a barrier. 20, 12 through 17. The final 6 of the Ten Commandments deal with the principles that define boundaries for healthy human relationships. Only the command to honor our parents is stated positively. The other 5 are negative. Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not lie, and do not covet anything belonging to your neighbor. Jesus summed up these human relational boundaries like this: love your neighbor as yourself. The greatest commandment assumes that we have cultivated a healthy self-respect and follow it up with loving actions that respect the boundaries of others. 2018 through 20. Here we see the people of Israel as they shook with fear before God's holy presence. Fear is an emotion that can either be healthy or unhealthy. When we fear danger or the consequences of inappropriate actions, it is a helpful guide. But when fear is constant or overwhelming and not connected to reality, it is unhealthy. The fear of God can be defined as thoughtful reverence for God. It is certainly a healthy emotion based on the reality of God's holiness. Fear of God should result in a vibrant faith and motivate us to act according to God's plan for our lives. 21:2 through 11. God showed concern for people in bondage and granted them a means of gaining their freedom. But as with any situation involving a network of relationships, there were possible complications. Some people may have been affected adversely by the freeing of a servant and set out to stop the process. And when servants are freed, they need to learn some difficult lessons about living responsibly without a master or direct
Where was that?
their behavior. 21:2 through 11. These same truths apply as we enter a season of spiritual renewal. Some of the people close to us may stand against us because they benefit somehow from our bondage. Such obstacles must be overcome. We also need to learn to live responsibly and unselfishly as we begin our lives of freedom. 21:5 through 6. God offered each servant the option of becoming a servant for life. The idea of becoming a servant for life by personal choice was used in the New Testament to illustrate the commitment we should have to Jesus Christ. Being a servant to a loving and gracious master is a wonderful thing. It has been said that we are all slaves to something: our passions, material things, alcohol, drugs, and expectations of others, or any number of things. But none of these masters is kind. Only God truly loves his servants. He is the only master worthy of our voluntary, lifelong devotion and service. 21:12 through 27. These laws deal with the consequences of inappropriate behavior. Notice that compensation for wrong behavior is emphasized, making it clear that God holds us accountable for our actions. These laws reveal God's instructions for maintaining an orderly, healthy society when proper boundaries have been overstepped. They safeguard human relationships and personal identities while also recognizing the worth of life and property. 21:28 through 36. According to this passage, we are not only accountable for our own actions, but also for everything we own. For example, the Israelites were required to control their animals so they couldn't damage the property of others. Even if the owners were not directly involved in the incident, they were still held accountable for the actions of their livestock or members of their household. This kind of mature accountability serves as the basis for a just and responsible society. 21:32. 30 shekels of silver was likely the standard or average price for a slave in the ancient Near East. Yet, as much as this may have been worth, it could not compare to the true value of human life created in God's image. Oppressed people are often bound by a poor self-image. It would have been the interest to all slaves at this ancient time to learn that the Son of God would someday be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. He submitted to such humiliation that he could heal us from our sinful past, breaking the bonds of our sins. He came to set us free, buying us back with his very life.
You know, you said it said that oppressed people often have low self-image. It's true.
Yes, that is very true.
And you know, you can be oppressed in many ways. You know. Is that all you got? You know, I'm always cleaning these glasses, and I think it's just my eyes. Just saying, I got old eyes. I can read your Bible from here, but I can't read mine. It's too close.
I'm going to read this.
Okay.
God's top 10 laws for living. Oh, the top 10. This is a David Letterman thing. Ages before late-night TV host David Letterman popularized his humorous top 10 list, God gave humanity his top guidelines for living, the 10 Commandments. Emphasizing the importance of putting God first in all areas of life, these laws... That's Cash. He's trying to call my phone, too. You may want to just text him.
Okay.
These laws cover everything from adultery to theft to murder. Not surprisingly, two of the 10 give God's views on how the sexes should relate to one another. The seventh commandment, you shall not commit adultery. God created men and women as sexual beings meant to enjoy the deepest forms of sexual intimacy. But the Bible makes it clear that sexual intimacy is to exist only in the context of a lifelong, faithful, monogamous relationship. Scripture is rife with examples of how sex outside the marriage can contaminate and ultimately destroy every area of our lives. The 10th commandment tells us not to covet, be envious of, things that belong to other people, including their houses, oxen, or donkeys. Perhaps we could substitute more contemporary modes of transportation, such as our neighbor's late model BMW. High on the list we see, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Here again, because we are sexual beings, God specifically applies the commandment to sexuality. Over the centuries, some have complained that the 10 Commandments are too negative. Do not do this. Instead of positive, do this. Others have suggested that God seems preoccupied with sex, but considering the many ways inappropriate sexual relationships can complicate our lives, God instructs regarding adultery and covetousness are appropriate and necessary. He is not trying to squelch our fun, he's trying to cut down on our heartache. I was going to say something about that, but I'm drawing a blank now.
Maybe it'll come to you after she's done.
What did he say?
Oh, he said just give him a call when we get done.
Okay. So then go on to our podcast,
The Bible Recap.
the Bible Recap. Scroll down to
I hope everyone's enjoyed this and we haven't bored the crap out of you today.
19 through 21.
It's been a little long, but and this is literally how we do it. Like, we just sit down and talk about it, so I think we're getting more and more comfortable in front of this camera thing.
Yeah, and one of the things I kind of mentioned to Angela yesterday. Well, I don't know if I should say it. Well, okay, one of the things, we may look for a different structure to do this. That way it seems more, because maybe people just don't want to sit and listen to us talk.
Well, I don't know. I think that the whole purpose of this was for us to just sit down and be us, and if anybody wanted to join with us, that would work. So I think it's good because it's definitely approachable. Like, if you're nervous about it, you know.
No, wait a minute. It was your idea.
Yeah, but I meant structure as...
Continue. We're almost at an hour here. We're going to go over an hour.
Hey, Bible readers, I'm Tara Lee Cobble, and I'm your host for the Bible Recap. About 7 weeks after leaving Egypt, the Israelites finally make it to the wilderness of Sinai, at the base of Mount Sinai. We've seen this mountain referred to earlier in Scripture as the Mountain of God, and it's probably also the same place as Mount Horeb. It seems to be one of God's favorite places. Here, God calls to Moses from out of the mountain, and Moses passes his words along to the people. These people who, as far as we can tell, seem to complain more than they praise, promise to do everything God commands of them. We'll see. God says he's going to meet the people at Mount Sinai, so they need to consecrate themselves. This is the same thing he called them to do for the firstborns. and it basically means set them apart and prepare them to encounter God. It usually involves a bath and some clean clothes. And Moses also tells them to abstain from sex during this time, not because women are evil, but because things like seminal fluids and blood are symbols of life and death. As far as their laws for cleanliness are concerned, to be depleted of either of those things points to the depletion of life, which wasn't considered an appropriate way to honor the presence of the giver of life. When the people come to meet God, they cannot touch the mountain or they'll die. And if someone does touch it, no one is allowed to touch that person. That would mean the transfer of both the death sentence that person was carrying and the transfer of the power of God. It's kind of like grabbing somebody who's being electrocuted. God's power is not hypothetical. Being in contact with it has verifiable, dramatic effects. You may have noticed that he says they have to kill anyone who touches the mountain. It doesn't say they'll die from touching it. This is interesting here because it shows us that God regards killing as a different thing than murder. We see this again in 21:12 when he says, "Whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death." I'm not making any kind of political statements about the death penalty here. I'm just pointing out that Scripture makes a distinction between murdering someone and killing someone as a penalty, or even as an accident. The reason I'm pointing this out is because some people say God contradicts himself here by telling them to kill someone, then issuing the 10 Commandments only a few verses later. But the Hebrew phrase in the 10 Commandments is best translated as, "You shall not murder." Murder specifically is different than killing in general. The Hebrew word for murder is never used in the Old Testament when referring to war or capital punishment. So here they are at the mountain of God, and on the third day there's a big storm and a loud trumpet blast. God descended on the mountain in fire, and it was covered in smoke. Oh, there's also an earthquake. Then in the midst of the storm, a fire, smoke, an earthquake, and an ever-increasing, ear-piercing trumpet noise, God tells Moses, "Come closer. Climb the mountain that no one else is allowed to touch." And Moses does. God has a few things to tell him. Then we hit a section lots of you are familiar with, the 10 Commandments. So I'm only going to hover on a few points. In this section, it appears God is talking to Moses and the people are overhearing the whole thing. God opens by using his personal name with them. "I am Yahweh, your God." He reminds them who he is to them and how he demonstrated his commitment to them. He says, "I brought you out of slavery." He starts this section with who he is and who they are to him before telling them his laws. He enters with relationship.
Me either.
Then he gives these 10 words. That's what they're called in Hebrew.
don't
But
say
just
it.
because they're
Because I
called
am the Lord your
words and
God.
not commandments doesn't give them any less weight. They're still the words of God, which is why the translators often call them commandments instead. The first 5 words are vertical. They show us how to honor God. The second 5 words are horizontal. They show us how to honor others. The 5th word, which is about how to honor parents, acts as a kind of hinge which swings in both of these directions. The second word, the one about idols and graven images, it points out our natural inclination to worship things. Everyone worships something. Mostly we worship what we see regularly. The challenge for our idolatrous hearts is that Yahweh has no physical form. So in order to worship him, we have to set aside our human nature, which means setting aside the created things we could see with our eyes. You may wonder about theophanies here. Even though God has no physical form, he does appropriate one from time to time, but he shouldn't be thought of as attached to or confined to that form. Some people even believe this commandment prohibits having images of Jesus or crosses. And it's definitely true that those things can be worshipped or idolized or treated as though they have magical powers. I've seen it. Honestly, I'm all for getting rid of pictures of Jesus, especially because most of them are Renaissance Jesus, all blonde-haired and blue-eyed and European. Anyway,
I've
the
never seen a
Israelites would not
blonde-haired
make any images of humans or animals because of this word. They know the human heart's propensity to worship things. So the only kind of art allowed in Jewish homes or synagogues is geometric art. It's a far cry from the cathedrals we see today. Not long ago, when an artist erected a statue of David in Jerusalem, some of the locals who love David broke its nose off because they take the second commandment seriously. I want to say a bit about the word jealous here because in this passage, God says, "I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God." God's jealousy here is not like our jealousy, not at all. The Hebrew word used to describe God's jealousy here is only used in reference to God. The meaning it carries is more like protective or zealous. God is protective of and zealous for his relationship with us. God's jealousy is entirely different than the kind of jealousy you and I feel. The word used to describe that kind of jealousy carries more of a connotation of envy, like Joseph's brothers felt toward him. In the third word, we see how seriously God takes his name. There are lots of layers to this word, but I want to point out two in particular. This word prohibits any kind of insincere or frivolous use of his name because it suggests we're not taking it seriously. Personally, I don't even like to use the acronym OMG because of what it represents. God takes personal offense to anything that diminishes his character or personhood, which is the next thing I want to point to. As we've talked about before, God's names represent his character and his actions. So taking the name of God in vain could also correspond to doubting that he is who he says he is, disbelieving his character. Many of us may have never misused God's name in our speech, but if we've doubted God's character in our hearts, this verse calls us out. After God finished these 10 words, 20:18 tells us the people saw the storm and the trumpet and the smoke and they were afraid. Then Moses responds with something that sounds completely contradictory. He says, "Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin."
Yeah.
So which is it, Moses? Should we be afraid or not? You're sending mixed messages. The first use of fear in Moses' statement, "Do not fear," carries the meaning of dread. It's the same word used in Genesis 3:10, where Adam sinned and he was afraid, so he hid from God. That kind of fear drives us away from God. In Scripture, this kind of fear is sin adjacent. It's either a response to sin, or it leads to sin, or both. That is the kind of fear Moses is telling them not to do. Then he says, God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. This is a different word for fear in Hebrew. It carries the meaning of reverence and awe, and it's joy adjacent. It has the effect of drawing us to God. The fear of God is comprised primarily of delight and awe. It moves us toward him. It's the way we feel about the Grand Canyon. We take long trips to get to it, to stand on the edge of it with our eyes and mouths open wide, taking it all in, while simultaneously being fully aware that it has the power to kill us. Awe and delight and respect. That's the kind of fear we're supposed to have toward God. And as Moses said, that kind of fear keeps us from sinning against him. It produces righteousness in us. We have to reframe the way we think of the fear of the Lord, because most of us picture it as him throwing out lightning bolts on any sinners who dare to darken the door of a church. It's not what it is. And when we think of it in that way, we malign his character, which is, as we just talked about, a kind of taking his name in vain. We hit a section in chapter 21 that is just a general outline of how to live in society with civility and respect for each other. It's aiming to establish ideas of justice and morality that will promote a culture that thrives. In general, it seems to be less about how to treat people and more about how to handle those who mistreat people. It reveals God's desire to protect and respect life, including life in the womb, because all life points to the giver of life, and especially humans who are made in God's image. Speaking of which, what was your God shot today? I loved in 19:5-6 where he called Israel his treasured possession, and he told them they were a kingdom of priests. Priests are mediators. So if the Hebrew nation is a kingdom of priests, that means there has to be someone else on the other side of them that needs to be connected with God through them. This is all a part of God's plan to use the Israelites and Jesus specifically as a way to connect himself to the other nations of the world who are not Israelites. God chose the Israelites as his people in order to make a way for the people of the disinherited nations to be adopted into his family. He's not exclusive. He's just specific. He's drawing people from all nations to him through Christ. And he's where the joy is.
As usual, that was a lot to take in.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Thank you for being with us today. We went really long, but I think it was a pretty good Bible study. For me it was, at least. You?
Yeah, I agree. All right, guys, thank y'all. We went over an hour, but if you stayed with us for the whole thing, thank you for giving us
That
an
much
hour
of your
of your
time?
day.
Yes.
Hope y'all have a wonderful...
Friday. I think it's Friday.
Today's Friday. We never know what day it is around here.
No, we don't.
So, all our days run in together.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Y'all have a wonderful Friday. Stay safe. Roads are icy. And we'll see y'all tomorrow. Let's see if we can get it to work now.